John Bond, the coordinator of Just Governance for Human Security. Let's talk about the problem of Aboriginals in Australia. How many are still living and what's their situation now?
There are about 500,000 Aboriginal people out of Australia's population of 22 million, and they live all over the country. But one of the painful episodes after white people came to Australia in 1788 first, of course the Aboriginal people were treated very badly, and there were massacres, and disease and many things reduced the population greatly. But another tragic event was that many of the Aboriginal people were taken from their families and put into institutions, white institutions, to bring them up in a white culture, because the idea was that Aboriginal culture would then die out, and this caused great hardship to the Aboriginal people.
It was a cultural genocide.
That's right.
Now, how can you do something to change the situation, to regain, if possible, the cultural legacy of Aboriginals?
Well, this is what I was involved in. In 1997, a report appeared after a national inquiry into this policy, which removed tens of thousands of Aboriginal children from their families. And the report showed it had done immense tragic harm to the Aboriginal people. Every family had been affected. So the report said we need to do things differently. We need 54 different recommendations they had. And one of the recommendations was that a national apology be made. And the government was not interested in apologizing. So some of us came together, and I was the secretary of a movement called the National Sorry Day, where we said we need to have a day to say sorry to the Aboriginal people. And the government said we're not interested. So we said, well, if the government won't apologize, the community can apologize. And we invited all who wished to, and to all our astonishment, including the government's astonishment, 1 million people joined us. And we had a huge day on the 26th of May 1998, when 1 million people said sorry to the Aboriginal people in events all over the country.
For a long time there has been the policy of white Australia, that means that only people with European roots could migrate to your country. Then this policy was officially cancelled by but now we see that, for example, about refugees, there are still many problems, and Australia is one of the countries which are not open at all to refugees. So now part of that policy is still alive?
Yes, the actual White Australia policy finished under the Whitlam government of the 1970s, the early 1970s. And then people of all races were welcome. And that has operated. And it is true still that Australia takes each year well over 100,000 new people, and that includes tens of thousands of refugees who come officially from refugee camps and so on. The government has been very cruel and unjust in the way that they have turned back refugee boats. They said these are illegal, we bring refugees in officially, we're not going to bring them in any other way. But of course some people are fleeing from persecution, and the refugee conventions say that they should be welcomed. And because we have a hostility to this in Australia, which governments have fed, we are in the terrible situation where we refuse to accept people who are in desperate need of shelter from persecution. And some of us are working to change this, and there is a strong movement which I hope will succeed in changing it.
And finally, about migration, someone in Europe is hailing the system based on points. How is it working? Is it really a system to copy or not?
the British government has said that is not realistic for Britain. It works for Australia because there is a system of having points for different occupations, for different ages, educational qualification, which does make sense in the Australian context. But it makes no sense here in Britain. And although the Boris Johnson in the Brexit campaign said we should employ this point system, in fact it is impractical, and the government has stated quite clearly since then that they will not apply it. So I, who work strongly for the remain of Britain within the European community, regard that as one of the dishonesties in a campaign to pull Britain out of the European community, which was full of lies.